what occurred, and the reason that she's not here, and why beautiful, sweet Kathy that I met very young and saw her transition to somebody angry and frightened, just really shows me that the unnecessariness of this is the biggest loss to all of us. And I'm sorry for the Mormons as well. I know that they're in pain. And I just want to say that all of us that knew and loved her were benefited and are benefited from having her as part of our lives. And she's still a big part of mine.
Thank you.
And Tom. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr.
Davy Berman.
Davy Berman, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Berman. Welcome to our court. I'm interested in what you have to say, and make sure you speak to me. Address your comments to me. You may speak as slowly as you wish, and you may speak.
First, I want to thank the judge, the jury, prosecution for the due diligence and sticking with it for such a long trial. And this morning, I went.
Take your time. It's okay.
I visited her and told her she could rest easy. The justice has been done. She just got to know my daughters. She had never met them, but she had written a couple of letters to them. And her and I always had a special bond. And I'd like to say I talked to her and told her she could rest. And I'd like, can I say something I'd like Durst to do?
You may say what you wish as long as you address it to me.
I'll address it to you. He should let us know where Kathy's body is so her family can get some closure. And that's about it.
Thank you, Mr. Berman, for sharing your comments.
Mr. Berman's daughter, Grace Berman.
Again, to reiterate, thank you to everyone that has been involved and for your determination and your unbelievable strength throughout this process. I will miss Susie. I will miss her phone calls, and I will miss her letters nonstop explaining to go forth and be strong, especially in the business world. She was very educational and very smart in that area. If I ever had a question or if something stumped me, she would always have the answer for me. She was a phone call away. She gave Bobby half of his life of freedom. And that came at a cost of her life. In life, he tortured her when she was alive, mentally, emotionally, and financially on a daily basis. Which she decided to get on with her life. That was just too much to bear. And unfortunately, a beautiful person had to take the brunt of that. strong. That is what happened. You don't get to just pack up your toys and go home when you're done playing with someone to the tune of murder. I don't expect ill will. Matter of fact, I would like Bobby to live many, many years. To be on record for the longest living predator ever. And with each breath between, from right now on, when you breathe in, you will hear Susan. When you exhale, you will hear Berman. And the ringing in your ears may never stop. Again, I thank you, and we will miss her.
I appreciate that. Thank you. A fourth speaker?
Finally, we have Sarah Kaufman.
Hello, Your Honor, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. The question we are meant to tell you about here, what Robert Durst's actions have cost us, and what would be an appropriate sentence, is very strange and almost impossible to contemplate, much less describe how I feel and what this has cost me in my life. What would my life have been if Robert Durst hadn't murdered my mother? I could spend the court's valuable time describing the quarter of a century before Susan's murder, the before, during, and after our lives together, the dreams, hopes, plans, and efforts we were in the process of working toward.
You may slow down. I want to hear every word.
How we were all working hard to improve our lives after the unbelievable disaster that had devastated us. I could tell you how every plan, all the work, every choice, and seed planted for a better future were completely ripped away. Then I could articulate how the options, much less the choices, dried up. How the pain and sadness, grief, and mystery of Susan's murder changed everything, and what those changes were starting 21 years ago. The truth is I can't tell you what life would have been if she hadn't been murdered. It's so long ago, and this has been so all-consuming, I can't remember the details of my previous desires, hopes, wishes, or plans. Much less tell you how they all would have or could have turned out. All I can say is at 47, I'm still in the same type of job, never advanced. No wife, no children, and almost no family because of what Robert Durst has done. How do I describe what I lost in Susan when it was something I never had before and barely had a chance to appreciate? I have no desire to, but all I can attempt to tell you is what life has been since my mother's murder. It has been a daily, soul-consuming, and crushing experience. Since my mother's murder, there has not been one day that I've not lived that has not been at the center of every thought, feeling, choice, or breath I take. I have not had one day off in almost 21 years from the absolute destruction, grief, or pain that this has caused me. My mind, body, and soul tortured by the effects of this has had on me every second for 21 years, and likely to go on the rest of my life. I go to sleep angry, wake up angry, eat and drink angry. I can't describe the PTSD or the nervous breakdown I'm still trying to recover from. The extreme stress, depression, anxiety that fills my days. I can't say I remember what I felt like before my mother's murder, much less try to compare it. The absolute chaos that the murder of my mother turned my life into is beyond description. I was in my mid-20s then, finally feeling like I was getting on my feet in life, and did so with Susan's help and support. At a time when her life was becoming more difficult and desperate, she always had time and interest to help me. I should have been working for a career I could be proud of, finding love, getting married, and having children. Instead, I was forced to pay for memorials and bills that were not mine or planned for. Having to spend what time I could manage to not be in tears or feel the hopelessness of going on another day, filing for death certificates, paying for probate lawyers. Having to maintain all day at a job, smile when you want to cry, be strong when you feel weak and tired. And you have to, because if you don't, you will lose that job, and because you don't have the money or time to take off that you should. And any time you are not physically at work, you spend seeking answers to a mystery you can never let go of. The countless meetings and conversations you have to have with people you never wanted to meet, much less deal with. scramble to make sense of a life of your mother who didn't have a chance to actually prepare for her death, say the goodbyes, and make the arrangements in advance. To spend days and months at the house where she'd been murdered, her dried blood and matted hair at your feet, broken up only by the bloody paw prints of her dogs. And you have to be there to pack up her belongings in boxes and find a place to keep them in your 400 square foot, no bedroom apartment. Every item in a box, a dagger in your heart, every box a weight around your neck. I would have paid anything to not have to do that. The list of time and money and pain expended, from big to little, truly go on for 21 years and will into the future. But this has been for me, no one can truly know. I honestly wouldn't wish the knowledge on anyone, much less the experience. Sadly, there are people who can, do, and will have the experience, and some even worse. I can't tell you what life would have been, and I have no desire to tell you what life has been. I only wish to tell you a little of the Susan Berman I knew. There's so much that has been said, truths and half-truths, half-lies, and outright, bold-faced, self-serving lies about Susan, and not just by Robert Durst. I wouldn't know where to start or how not to take days to articulate them all, or how they've added to my anger and frustration. Without Robert Durst in her life, Susan would have been thought of as a true and fiercely loyal friend, putting their needs above her own, and always available when you need it. Someone with a fascinating and tragic history, alone in the world by the time she was 13, eccentric, vivacious, and generous to a fault, often needy and phobic, a force of nature but extremely smart and witty, a hard-working, creative, talented, and complicated person with a lust for life of which the world needs more of, especially these days. This is who Susan Berman was. Robert Durst took those wonderful traits and twisted, exploited, and abused them. So for the last many decades, my mother's memory has also been twisted and abused. Hearing from Susan's friends and family, you never hear of her acting lazy or exploitive. She was not conniving, not a gold digger, not taking advantage of others for her own gain. Despite the description of Susan in the media and in this trial, and except for the most technical of realities, Susan was not a mob princess, doling out mob morality and edicts. Because of Robert Durst, and because of her deep love and sense of protection for her family, she made a mistake. She did something that helped one, but contributed to the pain of many, because of Robert Durst. While the last decades have been a deeper education of the person I knew, and I've learned many things, I can tell you the worst flaw Susan had. She had horrible taste in men, with a few exceptions of which I count myself among. My mother was flawed, to be sure, but she was loving and committed, and I lost the only person in my life that has ever made me feel that way. Our statements today are meant to be a description of what we have lost because of Robert Durst. I've lost everything many times over because of him. Family, friends, romances, jobs, investments, health, and sanity. I have lost and sacrificed more than anybody can possibly know. I have lived the experience of Robert Durst as no one else has or could. A daily nightmare I have yet to wake up from. However, I feel I need to speak for some that won't, aren't, or can't speak today, but affect me almost as deeply. What Robert Durst's actions have cost my sister Mella beyond the obvious. She and Susan had a falling out before her death. It was a fight, a bad fight, and I know they both hurt the other deeply. But it was just a fight mothers and daughters have. Robert Durst stole their opportunity to reconcile, to forgive one another and reunite in the loving relationship they both worked so hard to have. Susan can't meet Mella's children, who won't experience the profound love she would have bestowed upon them, or feel the love of grandchildren in return. Mella's feelings about Susan stuck in their last interaction of pain, hurt, and resentment because of Robert Durst. In turn, Bob, the damage you did has fractured my relationship with my sister in ways I don't think we will ever recover from, which make us both alone in the world more than we should have to be. Kathy, Susan, Morris are gone. Gone in the most horrific ways imaginable. Vanished, executed, dismembered, gone. Your wife, your best friend, your neighbor, gone. Susan may be the most important person to me personally, but they've all affected me. What you have done, what it forced me to do, what I have lost because of you, Bob, everything many times over. How much has it cost me and my sister? Incalculable and indescribable. You are done, except for a few remaining details. We all know what happened. The belief that you have that has allowed you to continue to lie in the face of morality, ethics, to the face of the judge and jury, because what do you have to lose at this point is over. I hope in your final days and hours you will come to the same understanding and give the McCormicks what little they are asking for, to find Kathy, to lay her to rest appropriately, finally, and at long last. This is the most important question that still haunts us, but I know the McCormicks most of all. Is the one and only thing you have to give of any real value or ability to sway any opinion of you. The final analysis of anyone's life comes from what they leave behind. Actions and how we are remembered are the only real legacy we have. Not the lies, not the words, but the actions. You know your actions. We know your actions. Your legacy is nothing but that of a small, warped, insignificant child throwing murderous tantrums. However, in telling where Kathy is, perhaps you can find some small redemption in an act of humanity. You have murdered the only people who you were ever able to inspire to love you. You took them for granted and abused their love. More than 10 years ago, I received an end to one of the haunting questions that tortures me daily. Who murdered my mother? I was fortunate, if fortunate is what you can call it, to finally solve what happened to my mother, and in turn, Kathy and Morris. I was able to lay Susan to rest and know where to find her. I can't imagine the pain of 40 years of not knowing. So I ask this on behalf of Kathy and the McCormicks and in Susan's memory. I ask for what small and I'm sure insignificant apology I can offer to the McCormicks on Susan's behalf for the part she played in their continued pain. I ask this in Susan's memory and on behalf of a part of you I hope truly doesn't want to be seen as the monster you are seen as now. There's no amount of money you can pay and no amount of good deeds you can do to make up for what you've already done. Any hope you have, any hope of any kind of redemption you can find is in letting them know where to find Kathy. I don't know if I really feel like justice is being served today or even can be. Robert Durst was born into a life of luxury, and at every option in life, every opportunity, choice after choice, he has been able to do what he wants for almost 78 years, but that wasn't enough for him. The great wealth of his family wasn't enough for him to not steal from others. The unlimited opportunities he had were used only in the most self-serving ways. The ease of his life never colored with humility, decency, or charity. His wealth and luxury were used exclusively to serve his darkest selfishness. We are speaking, Your Honor, so that you can get a glimpse at what Robert Durst's actions have done to us, so that you can come up with a proper and fair sentence. But what sentence could be fair? He has lived his life of luxury and freedom. I can't imagine proper recompense. There's no good deed he can do or time he can serve, even if he had another 100 years of life left. The scales of justice can never be balanced. Whatever time he has left, he will live cared for, paid for by all of us, until he dies, most likely in bed, as comfortable as we can make him, as an enlightened society. Yes, he deserves the verdict of guilty, and yes, the absolute maximum sentence the law can issue. Yes, it is just. Yes, it is correct, and yes, it is about time. But I don't know what sentence you can deliver that would feel like justice. Another reason for our statements is so that Robert Durst might get a sense or feel in some small way our pain. However, Bob is a sociopath and narcissist in the extreme, and I've known many, my father among them. And rule number one is you do not let the narcissist know that they or how they have affected you. So what is the point but to add to our already insurmountable pain and grief, whose articulation will only serve to satisfy him? I am here because of our losses, because of you, Bob. The people we loved and everything that went with them, we lost because of you. You didn't just murder Kathy or Morris or Susan, you also murdered me. You murdered the person I was, all his dreams and all his hopes gone. He no longer exists. I am a whisper, a wraith of who I once was. My mother's murder and the events of the last 40 years will never leave me. You satisfied, Bob? In conclusion, to this court, all the members of the prosecution, the jury, and the other victims who have spoken, have yet to, and who can't speak. To all our loved ones here and departed, I love and thank you for this opportunity, but especially to Susan, my mother, whom I owe everything to. I love and miss you every day.
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman. Mr. Balian, are you presenting any other speakers?
No, thank you.
Mr. Lewin?
Your Honor, I did want to briefly address the court regarding sentencing.
Yes?
No other witnesses that we're presenting. May I address the court, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, I understand that this is a sentence that is life without the possibility of parole. I think it's important that it be understood that in putting on this trial, it involved flawed people. It involved flawed victims and flawed witnesses. And in presenting the evidence that we presented regarding what Susan Berman did, the evidence is very clear that she certainly assisted Bob Durst with covering up the killing of his wife. But first, I think it's important to understand that very likely, and the evidence would suggest, that Susan Berman did not cover up what was described to her as a murder. Susan Berman, very likely, as she said to one of her close friends who testified at trial, Bob Durst likely said to her that this was some kind of accident. False, not true. And Susan Berman, loving Bob, believing Bob, trusting Bob, and wanting to believe and trust him, decided to help. So I think it's important that although we needed to understand as lawyers and as jurors what Susan had done, the idea that she knowingly covered up a murder. I've spent a lot of years looking at all the evidence in this case. There is nothing that leads me to believe that Susan Berman was knowingly doing that. In the end, she made the mistake that many other people did in Bob Durst's life. They believed him, and she believed him. And I think it's also important, I've had a unique opportunity in this case to have worked on it for many years, to have interviewed Bob Durst back in 2015 in New Orleans, to have been a part of an incredibly long cross-examination here at trial. And it is our hope that at this point in time, Mr. Durst is certainly never going to see the light of day again. And all we can hope, Your Honor, is that in listening to the passionate statements of the people that he's heard, that maybe he says to himself, you know what, I'm old, and I don't know how much time I have left, and I want to actually do something selfless. I want to do the right thing and admit what happened with Kathy, what he did with her, what happened with Susan, what happened with Morris. Yes, there's a conviction. Yes, the jury found that Susan was killed because she was a witness to Bob Durst's concerns that he was going to be prosecuted for Kathy's disappearance and death. Yes, we've proven, I think very compellingly, that he murdered Morris Black. It was not self-defense or accident. But until and unless he decides that he's willing to actually say what happened, no one will have the answers. There's very little he can do for anyone now. That's the one thing. I tried when I interviewed him in 2015 to appeal to any part of humanity that he might have. I tried when he was on the stand to do the same thing. And I'm just hoping that maybe today, maybe listening, maybe understanding that he's old, and he's gonna have to, at some point, maybe in the not distant future, to face whatever is next. And that maybe he'd like to do it with as clean a conscience as he can. So I'm hoping, Your Honor, that maybe today, maybe we'll get some answers that we haven't gotten so far. I want to, on behalf of the Durst prosecution team, Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, I want to thank the court, first of all, for a very difficult trial, for an incredible amount of work, for going through, hearing hundreds of motions. You hear, there are commentators out there who have their opinions. They don't know anything about the case. They don't know the work you put in. They don't know the amount of litigation that we've had. You gave both sides a very fair and dedicated and high-level trial, and we're extremely appreciative. I also want to thank the jury, some of whom that are here today. The sacrifice they've made in my 30 years as prosecutor, I've never seen a jury do what they've had to do to come back. We had almost nobody of all those people. They had a get out of jury free card. They could have come back and said, you know what, I can't do it, I'm sick, I'm scared, I have issues in my life, and all of you, there are two, I hope they're spouses, or there's been a jury switch.
Yeah.
There are two I didn't recognize.
The
Wait a minute,
spouses.
You weren't on this case, okay. We're really slipping. We want to thank all the sacrifice. I'm glad there's some spouses here, because I know that it is difficult for people in your lives. I've had a chance to speak to some of you since the trial, and I can tell you of all the juries that I've picked in my career, you guys are really, really special, and we are incredibly appreciative for all of the sacrifice. And that again goes to the court staff as well, Your Honor. Again, I want to thank the court for everything it's done and for this trial. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewin. Will there be any statements in mitigation?
No, Your Honor. We intend to appeal.
Will there be an allocution by the
No, Your
defendant?
Honor.
He's welcome to do that. As Susan Berman's family has reminded us and described for us in a way that we couldn't have known without them addressing this court, Susan Berman was an extraordinary human being. I personally wish I could have known her. I feel I got to know her vicariously, far too late and under terrible circumstances. But she was an extraordinary human being. And killing her was a terrible loss to our community. This is indeed a horrific crime. This crime was a witness killing, and a circumstance of that crime was the denial of justice to the McCormick family. And they suffered terribly due to Kathy's killing, and saw her maligned and denied justice. And that's because the killing of Susan Berman foreclosed any chance of vindication. It's a witness killing circumstance, and the witness who was killed was Susan Berman. So that circumstance of the crime is a special circumstance which, in this case, as in any other witness killing, but in this case perhaps more than other witness killings, was a tremendously aggravated and awful, disturbing crime. The court's read and considered the probation and sentence report, and has considered the statements of witnesses, statements of counsel. The court's aware of the facts and circumstances of the crime. As to count one, the first-degree murder of Susan Berman, with the special circumstance of intentional killing of a witness pursuant to 190.2A10 of the Penal Code, it's the judgment and sentence of this court, Mr. Durst, that you be imprisoned in the state prison for the term prescribed by law, that is, life in prison, without the possibility of parole. As to the special allegation that the defendant intentionally killed Susan Berman by means of lying in wait, as described in 190.2A15 of the Penal Code, the same sentence is imposed and stayed pursuant to Section 654 of the Penal Code. As to the allegation that the defendant personally and intentionally used a firearm in the commission of this offense, causing great bodily injury and death pursuant to 12022.53D of the California Penal Code, the court imposes a term of 25 years to life in prison consecutive. Sentence for the allegations under Section 12022.53B and C are stayed pursuant to Section 654. The court will impose the maximum restitution fund fine of $10,000, court operations assessment of $40 and $30 facilities fee. As to victim restitution, Mr. Lewin, Mr. Balian, is there a claim under 1202.4 of the Penal Code?
Your Honor, originally we were informed by the victim's family members that there was no restitution. However, in hearing Sarah today, it dawned on me that perhaps he incurred some memorial fees. So I inquired again of him, and he said potentially, however, there's no receipts, etc. Could we just reserve jurisdiction on restitution? Perhaps counsel says he would waive defendant's appearance if there's need for a future hearing. And we can settle it at a future date if necessary.
Mr. Chestnut?
Yeah, what I said to Mr. Balian, out of consideration to Sarah and to Mr. Balian, is we would absolutely discuss with him the issue, and if we had to come back, we could waive Mr. Durst's presence and discuss whatever we need to discuss with the court, or perhaps work it out by stipulation.
Will he waive his appearance now?
Yes. Well, can I explain it?
Yes, you take a moment. The court will order restitution under 1202.4F of the Penal Code, subject to a hearing to identify victims. At that hearing, the court will reserve jurisdiction, and the people may calendar such a hearing. Mr. Durst has a right to be present. He may waive that right and allow his attorneys to appear for him at any such hearing, should it be calendared.
Mr. Durst indicated, yes, Your Honor, by agreeing to work it out, we know the court knows that we're not making any kind of admission as a result of that, but we're not making any kind of admission as a result of that. We just want to be courteous to the state and the account.
I believe I heard him say yes, but let me be clear. Mr. Durst, you have a right to be present at any restitution hearing. Do you waive and give up that right to be present? And allow your attorneys to appear in your place?
Yeah.
He's waived his appearance. The court will retain jurisdiction also for the people to calendar a hearing to compel defendant to pay the cost of his incarceration pursuant to 1203.1M. The court will order a DNA test pursuant to Penal Code Section 296 et sequitur. I ordered a Proposition 63 report. It actually just arrived. Mr. Durst was given an opportunity through counsel to complete such a form. He did not, and nevertheless, the probation department has indicated he has no firearms. Obviously, that's so. The defendant has been in custody on this case only, according to the defense emergency motion for release on bail filed May 13, 2021. That motion told me that the Bureau of Prisons had released their hold on March 25, 2021. Under in re Joyner, the defendant is entitled to credit for that day, part of that day, and any days subsequent. That day is correct, isn't it, Mr. Chesnoff?
I'm sorry, Your Honor, the last thing.
That day's correct, isn't it, that you
Yes.
reported to me? Then 203 days have elapsed, including that day. He has credit for those days only. In re Joyner is 48 Cal 3rd 487. I'm sorry, that's People versus Joyner. No parole admonition is required because there is no possibility of parole. Under People versus Scott, 9 Cal 4th 331, the parties may object to any aspect of the sentence that I have just described. This is your opportunity to allow me to correct any sentencing error I may have made.
We've submitted everything, Your Honor. Thank you.
Submitted, Your Honor.
Mr. Durst, you have a right to appeal from this sentence. If you wish to appeal, you must file a written notice of appeal with the clerk of this court within 60 days from today. If you appeal and you're unable to hire a lawyer, the appellate court will appoint a lawyer to represent you on appeal at no cost to you. Is there anything further from the parties?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Once again, I'm grateful to our jurors, without whom justice could not be done in this case. We could not have had a resolution one way or another without you being here and giving so generously of your time and of your lives to participate in this. My gratitude is endless to you. I'm so grateful to you. And to the attorneys, it's been an enormous privilege to behold the presentations you have made. Obviously, it's a rare occasion for a judge to be able to hear such an extraordinary case, an extraordinary presentation by a counsel. You, each in your own way, impressed me with phenomenal, unbelievably wonderful work. So thank you for your hard work. Again, to the families, it was very important for me to hear from you, and I know I did not hear from the McCormick family, but I am aware of the disappointment you've felt and the heartbreak you've suffered, and I know that the members of Susan Berman's family also spoke to that heartbreak which you shared. You have that bond, and I just wish you peace going forward from this event, from this trial. Very well. The defendant, Robert Durst, is committed to the custody of the sheriff for delivery to the Department of Corrections forthwith. Department 81 is adjourned.